I'm Mary Gerasi, and welcome to Outreach Programming on location at Channelside. We're here today with the SS American Victory, the ship right behind us, and three of the crew members, I could say, working with the program here. I'd like to go in order with Mr. Charlie Fuss, who's the ship's historian. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you, Mary.
And then we've got Tim Teehan, Volunteer Public Relations and Media Coordinator.
Thank you.
Welcome, Tim.
Hello, Mary.
And then we've got Mr. Jim Waters, who's the docent.
Docent.
And what does that mean?
Tour guide.
Tour guide.
Tour guide.
Fancy French word, eh?
Just fancy, when you're in a museum ship, you're called a docent.
And this is a living museum, is that correct?
This is correct.
Charlie's had a close relationship with ships in 1947. Tell me about your experience on board something similar to this.
Yes, I first went to sea in 1947 aboard a sister ship of the American Victory, almost from this very spot, as a dishwasher.
As a dish? Wow, you saw some action, eh?
As a dishwasher.
Lots of dishes.
Yeah, and from there I went to the Navy, to the Korean War, and then I spent 30 years at sea with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
So is this why you've returned as the ship's historian? What do you love about this ship?
Well, it's like a time capsule to me. It brings back my youth. And I got involved with it originally because I've written things for nautical magazines, and I wrote a book after I retired. So they wanted me to do a history of the ship. So that's what I started out doing. I wrote articles for magazines to publicize the program and to try to enlist support from various parts of the community.
Now, as we just said, this is a living museum.
Yes, it is.
And as the historian, what do you do? And have you found that people are interested in it? It sounds very exciting.
People are very interested in the history. They like to know the history of the ship. She served in 3 wars, and we've documented all that. We have all of the voyages documented. We have charts showing where she went. We have a large collection of U.S. Merchant Marine Maritime Service uniforms, badges, memorabilia from people who served during all of those wars. And we're setting up our museum as we go along. Right now we have displays of uniforms, of events, and we also have a prize on board. We have a propeller of a U-boat that was the first German submarine sunk by the United States in World War II.
Wow, what a find.
Yes, it is.
A rare find. Now tell me about the various wars that this ship saw service in.
Yeah, well, she was turned over to the Warshipping Administration on 20 June 1945. She was immediately sent to an Army port. That was at Cal Ship near Los Angeles. She was immediately sent to an Army port for combat loading. She was combat loaded for the campaign that was going on at the time at Lingayen Gulf in the Philippines, the invasion of the Philippines. She went out there and she took part for a few weeks offloading combat cargoes, and the war ended. The Japanese surrendered. So she was sent as one of the first American ships to support forces that were landing in Japan for occupation. She went to Japan. From there, she went to Shanghai, and she was the first United States vessel in Shanghai after the Japanese capitulated in 1945 in September. She served there. Instead of sending the ship home across the Pacific, they sent her down to India, and she went through the Suez Canal and made a transit all the way around the world. And her first voyage was 35,000 miles.
Wow.
And it took a year. And those guys who signed on, you remember merchant seamen or civilians, they signed on for the voyage and they didn't get home for a long time. Now, after the war, she served another 3 years carrying Marshall Plan cargoes all around the world.
So tell me about the Merchant Marines in general. How do you get civilians to stay on a ship like this for a year? How does that fit into service to our country?
Well, merchant seamen sign articles when they go aboard a vessel. They sign a legal document saying they subject themselves to the master of the vessel for a given period of time to go to certain places. They get paid for that, of course. And that's how you sign up people. The Merchant Marine has been in existence forever. It's older than any military service. And people sign on for individual voyages, and they go where the ship has to go. And they are civilians. They're not part of the military, but once they sign a legal document, an article, then they subject themselves to the laws of the United States and to the jurisdiction of the person in charge of the vessel, which is a master.
Wow. I'm going to get back to you. I'd like to just bring in the other guests.
Okay.
You and I could talk all day, and we're going to have a half an hour to get everything out. So I wanted to bring in Tim Tehan. How you doing, Tim?
I'm fine, Mary.
You have to tell me the story of how you got involved with this ship. You haven't seen service in the Navy
I
or as a
haven't.
merchant Marine. Why are you working with
Well,
this
I'm
program?
the next generation from Jim and Charlie, and I grew up on the water, or close to the water in Detroit, and I've always had kind of a love affair with the water and ships. And I saw an article 6 years ago that mentioned that there was talk of bringing the American Victory to Tampa. So I expressed my interest and offered to help with some media and public relations work. And a week later, I was working for the group that brought the ship here. It's been, Mary, a real labor of love for me. It's to work with these veterans and fellows who served on these ships, and to see them create some of their things from the past when they were youngsters and such.
Reliving their memories.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's just a real touching for me, and it's just kind of neat to be around a ship that is this old and still has a lot of sailing life left in her.
For the love of the sea and ships, boys leave hearth and home for a damp world of spray and foam.
Now we have video of the Veterans Day program from a couple Saturdays ago. Why don't you explain the tribute that you presented on the ship?
Right. Well, we sailed the day after Veterans Day, Mary, and we focused our program that day on paying homage to veterans of all wars, particularly and to merchant mariners.
Today we remember them as we cast this wreath into the sea.
As well as to active duty military personnel from all services, including the National Guard and the reservists. And the trip was, it was a combination of fun, excitement, and touching ceremonies that we had to pay tribute to those who have gone before us, and also to those who are still serving. And we also had a burial at sea. We committed the remains of a 79-year-old merchant mariner who served during World War II, who had died, to the waters of Tampa Bay. It was a very touching ceremony. Everyone on board was very touched by it. So people who are on board, who came from or of all ages, were able to see a lot of different things. We had an exciting flyover by a World War II vintage aircraft, and people were able to take tours of the ship and have some great food and just enjoy a day on the bay.
What a better way to experience history. It's amazing. And we'll get over here to Mr. Jim Waters, who is the docent. An experience like that, taking an 8-year-old on a ship like this, taking anybody, any age, must have been exciting. What kind of excitement are you seeing when you're bringing folks on here? And tell me a little bit about how it connects to the public. What can the public do to get on board here and take one of these tours?
Well, actually, having the 8 to 10-year-old group is exciting enough. You be surprised at some of the things that come out of the mouths of the babes. We always ask if they know the name of the ship, and they all know it's the American Victory, but I preface it by saying, well, it's SS American Victory. Can you tell me what the SS stands for? It stands for steamship. And just about a month ago, I had a little youngster very timidly speak up, and he says, spaceship. So
The
that's
spaceship, American Victory.
sign of the times, you know.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing it because my background in World War II, I was a veteran of the Merchant Marine. I went to sea when I was 16 years old, 1943, and sailed for 3 years, not on Victory ships, but on ships similar to it, a C2 and Liberty tanker and the like. And when they brought this ship here and I found out about it and came over to see it, was like returning to the love of my youth. So now when I have an opportunity to take people through and tell them the story of the Merchant Marine, the story of the ship, so many people don't even know there is such a thing as the Merchant Marine, which really disturbs me no end, because in World War II, the Merchant Marine suffered the highest fatality ratio of any of the services.
I did not know that.
1 out of every 26 mariners was either killed in action or died from wounds received in action.
Wow.
Compare that to the Marine Corps, which had 1 in 34. And I jokingly tell people, they wanted to play it safe, they should have joined the Marines. You know?
Not the Merchant Marines. Wrong group, right?
Yeah, so, you know, it's a joy for me to be able to talk to youngsters and keep them informed that there was such a thing as a Merchant Marine. Actually, the Merchant Marine, it took 43 years for the merchant mariners of World War II to become known as veterans.
I want to get back to Tim. How important is it to have gentlemen who could tell personal stories about ships like this and personal experiences?
Right, Mary, it's very important. One of the goals of the project here is to bridge that gap between generations, between the generation of Charlie and Jim to my generation and future generations, to tell the story of the Merchant Marine and to describe the sacrifice that these men made in helping supply GIs during World War II and of course other wars as well. These guys who went to sea on merchant ships were far from the war front, but if it weren't for them, the soldiers and Marines on the front lines wouldn't have been able to have the guns and supplies that they needed to help win the war. So these guys played a very important part in our nation's history.
Yeah, we couldn't have done it without them, basically.
That's right.
It wouldn't have happened.
Exactly, and you know, the ship itself is a pretty important icon too of America's merchant marine past. Starting in roughly 1938 until the end of World War II, the government built over 2,800 ships. A ship like the American Victory would normally have taken a year to build, but they built 2,800 of them in just over 5 years.
Wow, record time.
It's absolutely, and so we're wanting to focus too efforts on highlighting the efforts of the men and women who worked in shipyards, the Rosie the Riveters.
Rosie the Riveter.
That's right.
In fact, there are several women in this very area that helped to build ships
Absolutely.
such as these.
And so, you know, you combine all that stuff, Mary, and particularly on our cruises, the emotion, you know, thousands of GIs went to war on ships like the American Victory. And so it brings back a flood of memories, some sad, some happy. The combination of all those emotions and the programs that we offer on board during the cruise really makes it an interesting, unique, and uncommon experience.
Well, and two things. I go to museums all over the world, but it's very rare that you actually have a living legacy on board, even at any place, to say, I know this because I was here, and this is how this works, and being able to relay the excitement and the stories related to it. How is this ship open to the public, and in which way? How does the American public, Tampa Bay public, get on this ship and get to take a tour?
Let's let Jim answer that.
All right, Jim, why don't you talk to me about that?
We're open 6 days a week.
6 days a week.
The Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4 and Sundays from noon to 4. We're closed on Mondays. And they just have to come down here to Channel Side and go up the gangplank and...
no tickets, no call in advance?
No, it would be great if there's groups going through. We do have group tours, which, by the way, is financially beneficial to those making the reservation, because we don't charge as much for that as we do for some just a walk-on. But
so it does cost you to walk on?
Yes. It's normally $8 for an adult. If they're a veteran, it's $7. And that's generally, that's a self-guided tour, by the way.
And where does that money go? Where does that money go? Because I know you have some great expectations
for the
for this
upkeep
ship.
of this ship. Actually, the first 4 years it was here, it was listed as costing the corporation that is responsible for it, the Victory Incorporated, roughly around $4 million to maintain this ship and bring it back to life. Now I understand the cost has been reduced because we've gotten over that initial hump of getting it back in shape. But anybody can come. We invite everybody, and they'll certainly learn plenty about this type of ship. This ship right here will carry the same amount of cargo that 300 freight cars would carry.
That's amazing. It
There's
doesn't look like it, does
9,000
it?
long ton in the 5 holds.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to give you a comparison, which I give to the people that come aboard ship. That is the equivalent of 2,450 Jeeps and 450 Sherman tanks. It sounds like a load, doesn't it?
It is a load.
It isn't, because we still got open deck.
Right.
We could carry maybe about a dozen knockdown fighter planes in crates, or a couple of locomotives on the foredeck.
So this is the workhorse. This was the workhorse of World War
Absolutely.
II.
And,
This one made it happen.
and actually, the Merchant Marine in World War II participated in every deep water invasion made during that war. I myself was in the last major engagement, which was the invasion of Okinawa.
So I wanted to get back with Charles, and similarly with you and your experiences. Why the Merchant Marines? You could have gone in the Navy, you could have gone in the Army, you could have gone into any other service. Why did you choose the Merchant Marines?
Merchant Marine would take you when you were 16 years old.
Ah, you didn't
The
want to
Army,
wait.
Navy, or Coast Guard, or Marines, you had to be 17 with parental consent. So they took people younger, quite young, and I was in the Sea Scouts in Tampa back during the latter part of the war. And a large number of our kids went over to the training station at St. Petersburg because they could enroll in the maritime service at 16. And then they were sent out, once they graduated from the maritime service schools, which were initially run by the Coast Guard, they went out to the maritime unions to assign them to ships. And they went to sea then a long time before they could do anything like that in the military service.
Now you also joined when you were 16.
Yes.
What would behoove a 16-year-old young man to join the Merchant Marines and participate in a major war, a worldwide war? It's phenomenal.
First of all, I was a wild kid.
An adventure.
You were wild, huh?
Yeah, and I didn't have any brains. So, no, the
16, I
the
mean,
world
that's
was
young.
completely different then. We were under attack, and we all wanted to do something for our country. And like Charlie said, at 16, I could get in with my mother's consent. She was a Navy nurse, and she didn't particularly care for me to do what I was doing, but it was one way to keep me in line, I guess. And I actually sailed the Great Lakes before I went deep sea. So I sailed ore boats on the Great Lakes, and then got my indoctrination as an ordinary seaman on the Great Lakes. And when I got my able-bodied seaman certificate, I went deep sea. And I sailed on a Liberty tanker, on a C2 freighter, the dry cargo, the same as the Victory here, and ended up on a C4 Marine Shark troop ship that carried 3,500 troops.
Wow. So, living legacies, you're part of history. That must be exciting to know that, you were part of one of the greatest wars this country fought, worldwide. So let's get back to the ship. How are you restoring, maintaining, and operating this ship, Tim? It sounds like it's a lot of work and it's expensive.
It is, Mary, since, as Jim mentioned earlier, since the ship has been in Tampa, we've been able to raise well over $4.5 million. About half of that has been in cash donations. The other half has been from in-kind donations of goods, materials, and services from the Tampa port community and others.
So you're supported here.
They've been tremendously supportive of our efforts. Tampa is a very logical place to have a ship like the American Victory here, because the port and shipping to Tampa is critically important. It generates $1.6 billion worth of revenue every year, the port does. Generates 93,000 jobs. And in fact, many Victory ships called on Tampa during their heyday.
That's what I heard.
That's
there.
right. And
we have a lot of veterans here as well,
that's
right?
Right.
Retirees.
Right. The community, the port community has been tremendously supportive, as has the community in general. We've had 3 relive history cruises so far since the ship has been here. We have another one scheduled for January 14th.
Oh, great. We'll put that out there for you.
Yeah, and we've accomplished a lot. We still have much to accomplish. So, for example, Mary.
Well, let's talk about your goals.
Yeah.
I know you have some very specific goals for this ship and this program. Tell me what they are.
We want to become the museum of choice in Tampa Bay, particularly for the maritime community and the community in general. It's a great the project has a great amount of interest for anybody who's interested in ships or the maritime side.
Well, how's that going to happen? How are you going to turn this into the museum of choice?
Right. Well, we've got volunteers. In fact, over 100,000 hours have been expended between when the ship got here and now. We're working on doing a lot of mechanical and carpentry work in the ship to create a world-class museum. We've got some educational programs that we mentioned earlier, and the cruise schedule that we're working on for next year that is focused on making the ship and its programs of more interest to to universal interest. The things that we can do on board the ships hosted a number of events over the years for various charity organizations. We even had a wedding aboard a couple years ago.
Wow, that's unusual.
Yes.
Let the battle begin, right?
That's right.
Right on the battleship.
Right on the battleship.
That's right. And there's almost nothing that can't be considered to be done aboard the ship. A couple years ago, a television series called Sheena was filmed aboard.
We all know Sheena.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so we want to make sure, we want to be a part of the community. We want to make sure that your viewers know that the ship is available not only for individuals to come down and step back in time, but also for companies and organizations to come down and use the ship as a venue for a social event or a dinner or a meeting, you name it, it's available.
And I think what's really rewarding too is, once again, to have these living legacies, these gentlemen who dedicated their lives to the war, and 80% of the people I know have never spoken to a World War II vet or a merchant marine. Or
for me, as the following generation, Mary, it's been a real rewarding experience to have gotten to know gentlemen like Charlie and Jim, who are very patriotic gentlemen who served our country in a unique way, and it really puts a different twist on this whole veterans thing. You know, we're losing them at a rate of about 1,500 a day.
Yeah.
Anymore. These guys have gotten kind of a new lease on their retirement. When we first started the
project, it's a win-win situation.
That's right.
All the way around.
That's right.
We've got 4 minutes left. We're going to have to wrap up. But Jim, I wanted to ask you if you could briefly summate some of the exciting things you're going to be able to see on this ship that the kids like, that folks aren't used to seeing. Give me a handful.
I had one youngster come with his mother aboard the ship one day. She bought the special tour, which was $12 each. And all the kid wanted to do was ring the bell, the ship's bell. So when he rang the ship's bell, they went back to the aquarium.
Wow, but he lived his little fantasy out, didn't he?
Yeah, I had one little girl
great.
come up to me, and she looked at me and she says, Mr. Waters, how old are you? And I says, well, how old do you think I am? She thought for a minute, and all of a sudden she says, 51. I said, sweetheart, you're my honey for life.
She rang your bell on that one.
She rang my bell.
She rang your bell. And I'm going to be wrapping up shortly. Charlie, what would you like to say to people out there having, major contribution to this patriotic endeavor. What would you like to tell the audience
Well,
about
I'd
this
like
ship?
to tell them that the average age of the steaming crew on this ship is 72, and we need young volunteers. We need lots of them. And that's what we need to keep this thing going and make it into a long-lasting museum and memorial to the merchant seamen who brought us through a bunch of wars.
And on that note, how can someone get in touch if they want to volunteer?
Right. The way to do it, Mary, people can visit our website, which is www.americanvictory.org. They can call the ship at area code 813-228-8766. And we're looking for volunteers in any realm, carpenters, steam fitters, anybody, cargo riggers.
They don't have to be merchant seamen.
No, it's great. You know, and I think one of the highlights, the thing that people have talked most about on our cruises is the vintage aircraft flyovers.
We have video of that.
Tremendously exciting, a lot of fun. Really, it's a unique, whether you visit the ship for a tour here at the dock or take a cruise, it's very unique, very interesting.
Yeah, it just sounds like the perfect way to relive history. An exciting way. I mean, at least you're not being shot at.
Right.
Or the submarines aren't going for the stern or the bow, right?
That's right.
It's probably the safest way to have a history
It sure
experience.
is, and it's a lot of fun too.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate
Thank you.
all of you being
Thank
here.
you, Mary.
Just a moment. Jim has one more thing to say.
We have programs developed that meet the Sunshine State educational standards,
Okay.
so that any teachers interested in having their children come aboard, we can accommodate them and meet all the standards the state requires for it.
We'll make sure that we put that out there, that teachers are welcome to bring students for an educational program that is under the Sunshine State standards as an actual curriculum. Is that correct?
Right.
An educational curriculum.
Right.
Well, what a wonderful way to spend the afternoon. And I appreciate all the work you do, and I'm sure the folks have been on the ship. And we'll see you in February. Maybe we'll go out with you again.
We'd love to have you, Mary.
Hope you do, Mary.
Thanks for being here. And thanks for joining us. Outreach on location at the SS American Victory ship and some of the folks with us today. Thank you very much.